Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Are you ready to live your best life, be stronger, and fall in love with yourself? It's possible and it's within you, but you need to unlock the power within. Welcome to Fearlessly Authentic with Jody Harrison Bauer. Jody is now living the best life ever, but it took some stepping out of her comfort zone. She's going to show you how it can be done. Here is your host, Jody Harrison Bauer.
Hey everybody, welcome to Fearlessly Authentic. I am your host, Jody Harrison Bauer, and thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are returning to the show, I really appreciate it. And everybody all over the world who's been listening, it is going to be an exciting show. And as you guys know, if you have been coming and listening to the show for the past 12, 13 weeks already, you know that it's all about educating you in something that's really exciting, empowering you, and then inspiring others, right? That's what it really comes down to. We want to educate, empower, and inspire. And, you know, not so serious stuff, but fun stuff. And today's guest is really, really going to rock your world. She has really talked about being fearlessly authentic, going outside of her comfort zone and everything that she does. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my guest today, Nikki Boyer. And first of all, I just want to thank you, Nikki, so much for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be on this show. I adore you, and I can't think of a better fit to bring this story, right? Fearlessly authentic, right?
Yes, absolutely. So a little background on Nikki. I am going to read this. And Nikki, first of all, as you just heard, she has the most amazing voice ever.
Oh.
She is a vibrant comedian, on-camera personality who is labeled as the girl next door with a little edge, for sure. She created, hosted, and executive produced the successful Wondery podcast, Dying for Sex, about her friend Molly and how her cancer diagnosis inspired sexual adventures to help her feel alive. And that's really how I connected with Nikki, was by listening to her podcast. Just a few other things just to let everybody know how accomplished you are. Nikki is also hosting the Daily Smile, a daily show about good news and positivity, which I think is so amazing because you know what? In times like this, we need positivity.
My gosh, right? Yes. So thanks for saying that. Yeah, I just finished the Daily Smile and then jumped in here. So I'm doing it every day and they're great stories. So I can't wait for you guys to listen.
Yeah, daily. We'll talk about that, but doing something daily, I think that's very cool because I think people don't always want to wait every single week to hear something super positive and fun, right?
Right.
And once you're on a roll, you're like, let's get this going.
Yeah, exactly.
So Nikki is also a 3-time Emmy award-winning TV host who made her mark as the host of Yahoo's Daytime in No Time, making her the most watched woman on the web with over 700 million clicks during her time there.
I know. It was another daily show, and it was at the time that Yahoo was booming and had that homepage. Remember, you'd always go to your Yahoo homepage and you just click things. Well, my show happened to be featured there on a regular basis, so I was the most clicked on woman on the web, which is quite a statement when you consider what people are clicking on.
Right. So didn't Yahoo have like a song, like was it Yahoo? Or did I just make that up?
No, that was it, but that was the song. It was just one word, but it went, Yahoo.
Right. I can't sing. So for everybody who knows me out there, you know I can't sing.
That's hilarious.
She's been a regular on E's Hello Ross, which is hilarious, co-host of the Straight Talk with Ross podcast, and a frequent guest on the Wendy Williams show. Amazing.
Thank you.
Just amazing. And I am very, very super honored that you accepted my invitation to be on the show.
Thank you. It's funny. When you start to do things and put yourself out there, people are like, oh, do we call your people or how do we get in touch to book you? And I'm like, I'm just a one-woman show. I've been in the business for such a long time, but I love connecting with people and I love My fiance just said yesterday, like, oh, I'm so sick of social media. I love social media because I feel like it connects me. I would have never met you. I would have never gotten to do this show. And I use it for the positive. I get rid of the stuff that feels trolly or crappy or negative. I just kind of block it. I put it out because I get to decide what shows up on my feed. I get to decide what I bring into my world. So I'm grateful that you reached out to me, and I'm so happy to be on the show. Thank you.
When I listened to the podcast, and I think what led me to go to it was the name Dying for Sex.
Yeah, I was wondering how you found it.
I was talking to my daughters about how podcasts, and I told my youngest one, who's 27, I said, when I
can't believe you have a 27-year-old. What?
And 31. My oldest is 31.
Jody, this is not. Yeah. How do you have?
You're so sweet.
That just blows my mind. When you go out together, are they like, oh, look, the sisters?
They do.
I'm sure.
They do. They do. Wow. And my oldest one looks like a mini me also. And some, I'll show you, I'll send you pictures after.
Will you send me? Okay, good. I would love to see.
Pictures.
Okay.
So, we were talking about how we find podcasts. So I was telling my youngest one who listens to podcasts all the time. I said, well, I'll just put in, like, say I feel like listening to something fitnessy or something empowering, or I didn't feel like listening to something sexy per se, but it came up. I don't know how. And
Amazing.
I thought, oh, well, is this porn? And,
right.
Oh, by the way, I just want to let everybody know who's listening, there are some sexual things we're going to be talking about, and there might be some expletives we might use, but nothing horrible. But if you have small children around and you might be concerned, this isn't like X-rated or anything like that. No. I just want to let you know, this is just girls talking about stuff. So just to let you know.
Yeah.
So I saw Dying for Sex, and I thought, oh, what could this be? It can't be porn. I really don't feel like listening to porn. Watching, listening are two different things. Just kind of a weird thing. So then I heard your amazing voice, and I thought, her voice. Wow, I need to listen to this. And then I listened to the trailer, and I thought, wow, what an amazing story this is. I must listen. And honestly, I was hooked. And after the first episode, I wanted to reach out to you and say, wow, this is amazing. But I said, no, I'm not going to bother her. But then I started crying. Mm-hmm. And that's when I reached out to you.
I'm so glad you did. Okay. Can I ask you, have you finished the podcast?
Did you
listen to? Oh, you did. Okay. All right.
I did. And I was sobbing.
Yeah.
I was sobbing. I had a lot of different emotions, but I want to share with everybody, and I'd love for you to do that too. Tell them about Molly. Tell them about how this whole journey began.
Okay. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Dying for Sex podcast, go listen if you can. By the way, it's on Wondery. Amazing. I have to say, I was always a fan of Wondery. I always thought they had a great way of storytelling. The fact that I got to partner up with them with Molly's story was amazing. It's a really interesting journey, because when Molly and I first started recording the episodes, she was healthy, quote unquote, right? Mm-hmm. She was going through her cancer treatments. She was feeling pretty good. She was diagnosed as metastatic, having, quote unquote, terminal cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. So there's no cure, right? It's just treatment until treatments don't work anymore. So when she got diagnosed with this, she decided to do something really bold. So she left her marriage of 15 years and decided to embark on a sexual journey. So we sort of tap into that in Dying for Sex. We talk about all the kinks and the fetishes and the crazy things that she experienced. And it's just two best friends talking. Well, in the process of us trying to find a home for the podcast, Molly was admitted into the hospital, and we knew that she was not going to be getting out. We knew this was going to be her final sort of visit to the hospital. And she was in the hospital for about, I want to say, almost 4 months. And then entered hospice. And along the way, we still continued to record a little bit. So we recorded 2 girls talking about sexual fantasies and escapades. And then it sort of, at episode 3, we start to peel back the layers of who Molly is, why she chose sex, and what it was for her. So I think the Dying for Sex title is very, wow, what is this about? But I think it's about friendship and about love and about overcoming adversity and about honestly talking about sex, which most people don't want to talk about, and death. A lot of people don't want to talk about dying and what it feels like to die. So that's, I think, what we did in the podcast. And I hope you listen, because it was pretty profound for me. And I think the people that have listened and commented to me are saying that it's been profound for them as well.
That's a great word, profound. That's a great way to describe the whole journey. Because if anybody who's gone through that with a loved one, a friend that they love, they know how difficult that time is. And you were
Yeah.
her person, you know,
Yeah.
you were her universe. And she was from the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
You were originally from the Midwest, and then you both
Right.
found each other in an acting class in California, right?
I know. So yeah, we both.
And you
in our
said she was
20s.
like in the acting class for a hot minute, right?
Right. Yeah. She was, I don't even think she knew what she wanted to do at that point. But when I look back and think, what if I wouldn't have shown up to that class that day? Or what if she
Right.
wouldn't have signed up? Like, we were meant to meet, but she did not like me at first. She thought I was, you know, the typical actress who's like, hey, pay attention to me, which really is not that far off. But then we got paired up to do a scene, you know, scene study, where the teacher's like, okay, the two of you are going to do this. And we got paired up to do a scene together. And we decided in the scene, I don't know if I've ever told this before, in the scene, she was going to play the really popular savvy girl, and I was going to play like kind of the homely dorky girl. So it was really nice to do that with her. And once we started rehearsing and spending time together, that's when I fell in love with her. She's quirky. She was odd, a little different than the friends that I had had before. But I really loved her. And, you know, 20 years later, you know, we were still best friends. And yeah, I was her person. I was her person. And that
Yeah.
was an interesting road to be someone's person as a friend, right?
A lot of responsibility goes with being that person when you know that you're that person's person. And so when you found out that when she shared with you that she was sick,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in her late 30s, I believe.
Yeah, she was, well, gosh, yeah, she was misdiagnosed at 32
Okay.
by our same OBGYN, who basically said the lump in her breast was nothing. So I always like, every time I'm doing an interview about Molly, I promised her that every time I got to speak about this, I would encourage people that early detection for breast cancer is so important, and it's not difficult to do. Go get a mammogram. If you think you might need one, go get one. If you think you feel something, go get one. Like, please go get a mammogram, because Molly felt something at 32. The OBGYN, who I'd like to, said, it's nothing, right? It's nothing. You're fine. You're too young for breast cancer. And so then flash forward to, I believe 38 was when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then had the double mastectomy, and went through chemo, radiation, everything. And then it came back in 2015. So she's had quite a 9-year battle almost with all of this.
She went through a huge, huge journey.
Yeah.
So when she was going through this, and you knew, you know, that you were best friends, or really, 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 really good friends, and that you were her person. Did you feel like this overwhelming responsibility to be there for her while this whole thing started?
You know, when she was diagnosed as terminal, I locked into her in a certain way. Previously, you know, her cancer diagnosis and her surgeries and all of that, I was very involved with her. I mean, we were really close friends. But full disclosure, at that time, she was still with her husband, and he was very much her caretaker. He was her champion. He was by her side. So even though Molly's relationship with him sort of changed and shifted, I do like to acknowledge that he was her person at that time, and took very good care of her and helped her to the best of his abilities. Obviously, you'll learn from the podcast and later in Molly's book that there were some things that were going on that were not really healthy for her. But he was
Okay, I think we froze for a second.
Oh, there you are.
I know. I froze and you froze, right?
I know we were like freezing at different times. At least we should
Yes.
freeze together, right?
I know. That would be funny.
Welcome to technology.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I don't even know what I was
and
saying.
You left off with just basically you want to let everybody know that when Molly was with her husband, he was a good caretaker. So
yeah, he took care of
Yeah.
her. And then eventually, you know, their relationship turned into what it turned into, which you will get details about in the
Right.
podcast and in her book. But then when she was diagnosed as metastatic, I felt a shift for me.
Okay.
And when she moved out, she moved very close to where I lived. So we were close in terms of friendship, but we were also very close in terms of distance, which made being there for her just so much easier. We saw each other on a very regular basis. Plus we were working on this project together.
Right.
So this gave us a reason, to get
Right.
together a lot.
So what made you, as she's going through this and she says, okay, I've been diagnosed, in my late 30s, and then it came back. And that's when she decided to leave her husband. We don't want to give out too much information because we want everybody to read the book. I can't wait to read the book.
I know, right? Me too.
But did you feel that she decided to just kind of go, that's when she was like, okay, I need to like go out there and have as much sex. I need to explore. I guess that's the word. I need to explore. I feel free. I want to free myself of my marriage because it's not working for me. I'm going to die. I want to explore everything.
Yeah, she was very clear that she had a certain amount of time left. She didn't know. She'd always say, is it years? Is it decades? Like, what is it? But she knew that it was different than the average person, right? She had a diagnosis there was no cure. And she was very good at being her own advocate, her own healthcare, advocate. She was very aware of the fact that she needed to try some different things that she was willing to do. She did cannabis treatment. She did chemo. She stopped chemo. She tried a hormone therapy. She tried radiation. She tried all of it. She was willing to try anything. And I think what was interesting was that this was all going on as she was also navigating her sex life. So she was navigating her health care and her sex care at the same time. So when Molly left her husband, which is so empowering, right?
Right.
But she says herself that when most people go through these types of treatments, it decimates their whole system and their sexuality and their drive. But for some reason, Molly felt very ignited and wanted to take what she had been doing virtually and bring it into the real world. So that's when she started having dates, seen many, it's so funny. This is her phone right here. I still have her phone. And I know I hold it every night and like touch it and think of her, but like, this is where she navigated her sexual awakening. It was from this little guy here. And I have all the texts, all the pictures. I get way more than I bargained for when I go through her phone. Sometimes I'm like, oh girl. But what I found amazing was that it was her way to reclaim some control of her body, of her emotions, of her life. And I think she knew also, Jody, it's important to know that she knew she was working out some childhood stuff, but she was also doing it from a very aware place. She was very aware of what she was working out. And so one day I picked her up for lunch. It was like 11 o'clock. So it's like old people lunch, when you're like, well, let's get in there before anybody else shows up.
Early bird special.
Exactly. The early bird special. I picked her up and she looked really cute. And I was like, why do you look so cute for lunch? Like, you didn't tell me this was a cute lunch. And she's like, oh, I've been on 2 dates already. And I was like, Molly, you have to tell me about this. And so as she's telling me about the dates and who she made out with and who she gave pleasure to in certain spots at Dunkin' Donuts and at the coffee shop, like stories that would just blow your mind, I said, I think there's a show here and I think it's called Dying for Sex. And she was like, and then from that moment on, we were like, let's make something. We don't know what, but let's make something together.
And I think that's how things happen. I think that when that light bulb goes off and we just say, okay, let's do it. And that's why that takes a lot of courage to just say, let's go forward with this. And she was probably super excited about it because, as you said, she sort of wanted to leave her mark, like she wanted to be remembered for something.
Yeah, she did.
And she did enjoy being the center of attention.
It's funny. She was always teetering on whether she wanted to be the center of attention or kind of hide, or be in the center of attention or kind of hide. And as a writer, I know she had always been wanting to write and to share and to share. But Molly shares in the podcast that she was a victim of some childhood abuse. So I think as a survivor of that, of sexual abuse as a kid, you are constantly teetering between wanting to be seen and wanting to hide. And I think a lot of that went on for Molly in her career, in her personal relationships. So she did love to be the center of attention, but also felt scared about it. But the beauty of this is that she sort of asked me when she was dying, it was so important to get her story out. She wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. And I think more than anything, which falls in line with your show, is to inspire other people. Human connection was so important to her. So incredibly important. Connections with her nurses, her doctors, the person taking the trash out in her room. And something so beautiful I wanted to share is that when she was getting ready to pass, she had her mom and dad bring all of her like knickknacks and items to the hospital. And she gifted all the people that came into her room with something of hers that reminded them of her, her of them. And she just really wanted to leave something behind. So in a way, I feel like I'm doing her work, which is continuing her story and her legacy, and what she left behind has been hard for me, but also so wonderful and beautiful. It's been my passion project.
Right, right. And it just came as an idea and you just said, let's go
Isn't that
for it. And
crazy?
did you just start recording? You just said, okay, you need to start telling me literally everything, because one of my favorite things about the podcast are the phone calls that you make.
Oh, right. So we did those phone calls after she'd passed away. So
Oh,
those were an after. Isn't that crazy? So Molly was never included in those phone calls, but we kind of enmesh everything in the podcast. But she wasn't a part of any of those. She would have loved it because we talked
yes.
in the original recordings of like, hey, let's call some of these guys. And you know what, Jody? We always thought there was going to be a season 2. Like we always talked about it and thought about it. And what are we going to do in season 2? And I still can't believe we couldn't do a season 2. And even though I knew that she was dying, I didn't know it, right? Like it
Right.
didn't, I knew it, but I just kept moving ahead, like as if she was going to be here for the long haul.
Well,
And
I
yeah,
I didn't think she was going to pass. I was rooting for her. I wanted to hear about
right.
more of her adventures. And once she got to the hospital, I realized, okay,
Yeah.
but then what I loved about it was that what you brought to the listeners was how she sort of went full circle.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
went crazy doing what she needed to do to have that connection, because that was so important for her to feel that touch, connection, whatever it was. And I remember sharing this podcast with a bunch of the ladies at my fitness studio and telling them what she was doing. And they said, well, I'd rather go shopping and I'd
Yeah.
rather be watching Netflix, or I'd rather be doing something else. And I said, it's interesting because you need to listen to it anyway, because everybody has their own way of dealing and connecting with
Mhm.
the world when they're going through something so traumatic.
I totally agree. And everybody's version of bucket list or adventure is different. Like, I think if there's a takeaway from this podcast, it's about healing, um, about forgiveness, about coming the you nailed it. Like being okay with the messy part of coming full circle. Like full circle is never like this beautiful journey. It doesn't really look like a circle. It looks like this, like it's all over the place. And her first full circle looked different than other people's. So I think if there's one thing to take away from this, it would be, what do you want to do with the time that you have left? And what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for a terminal diagnosis to finally do that thing or do those things or show up in the world the way that you want to? And a lot of people are, where we keep waiting, So one day I will, or someday. And I think for Molly, she really wanted to have sexual experiences. She didn't have them as a kid, not a kid, but she didn't have the sexual experiences she wanted as a young adult. She didn't have the relationships that she wanted. She didn't get to tune into her body the way that she wanted. So for her, this was part of her full circle. And she just, she went for it. So the Dying for Sex episodes start with fetishes, kinks, things that, I would get a little bit judgy about, even though I'm pretty sexually open. And I was like, whoa, what is she doing? And then you realize what that brings her to. So what she gets from the sexual exploration. And it's different for everybody. Everybody's idea of adventure is going to be different. But I think what she wanted you to take away is, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you're waiting for permission to do? And who are you waiting for permission from? Because you get to give yourself permission.
That's a great point, because I say that to so many people. What are you waiting for? Whether it's, in life, whether it's in a relationship, whether, because I've been in the fitness world for most of my life. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Because if you're waiting for that perfect moment, perfect moment's never going to happen.
I know.
And we all work really hard, and we have to, and that's why finding that balance is also super important, because sometimes we do wait until it's too late, or we get sick, or we lose somebody that maybe we didn't spend enough time with. And then what were we doing? Why didn't we do more with that person? Or why didn't I travel more? I mean, things are different now, but I think that she chose to spend her time that way. And then she was able to reflect after she sort of got it out of her system. And how cool was it to have you as a co-pilot?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's really nice to hear, because I don't even think in the moment what is happening. I realized that I was her co-pilot. But some of her favorite things that we did together were to share these stories. Like, she'd be like, oh, I just had chemo, or, oh, I just got this new drug, and I was, on the bathroom floor throwing up last night. But let me tell you about what happened Thursday night when I got together with, blah, blah, blah. And I think it was a really nice distraction from being sick. Yeah. And nobody talks about, how sex and death can be linked. But for Molly, it was about sex, was about creation, about connecting, about getting in there and getting uncomfortable and getting comfortable and then back uncomfortable again. And for her, that was the antithesis to death. She felt very alive when she was going through this. And coming from someone who dealt with sexual abuse in her younger years, sex was sort of this taboo thing that didn't feel like it was integrated in her body. And it was the first time she was integrating sex into her body after she lost her breasts, after she lost the capability of, parts working right. And I think it was a really interesting place for her to be, explore.
We're going to keep talking about this. We're going to take a break. I can't believe how fast time is going.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just like, whoa.
So we're going to take a break, and we will be back in a few minutes. Hang in there, everybody. We'll see you in a few minutes.
And we're clear.
Thank you. There's so much to talk
about.
Am I
talking too much?
No. And, one of the things, and I'm sure you've experienced this, or, maybe not, because we both like to talk, is that when you're interviewing people and then you listen to the interviews back, we're still live on Facebook, so everybody can still hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So it's not saying or listen. When I listen to myself back, I'm like, just shh, be quiet, Jody, be quiet.
I do that all the time. I go, wow.
Right.
I say wow like 70 times in my interviews. I'm like, Nikki, but then I'm like, you know what? Just be in the moment.
I do the same thing. And then when I'm listening to it for a sound clip afterwards, I say to my daughter, oh, why did I say like, was it so important for me to go yep, I get it.
I like that though. I like those moments, because I feel like then we're in it together and you're like with me.
Well, I'm trying not to interrupt you, so maybe I'll throw in a few But what I want to talk about when we get back is really like continuing to talk about that sex and death, but also sex, death, life.
Yeah.
And when the book is coming out.
Okay.
And what you're working on next.
Perfect.
And yeah, you're like a perfect guest. Thank you.
I just adore you. It's so easy with you. You were so
oh, thank you.
Easy. You asked awesome questions. You can tell that you spend time researching and like understanding your guests, and it's really refreshing. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. Coming from you, like this is all new for me, but I genuinely love people, and I genuinely love to learn. Because if we don't learn, we're not growing.
Right. I know. Right.
And I think that pulls back to the whole sex thing too. I wanted, when we get back also, I want to talk about, I don't know if this was the same thing for Molly, but I made up a lot of my time.
20 seconds.
40s, 30 seconds. Okay.
You did. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we
kind of talked about this a little bit on the phone, which
we did. Yeah, I won't get too much into it, but that's for another episode.
Right.
All righty, here we go. Coming back.
Okay.
You are listening to Fearlessly Authentic with Jody Harrison Bauer. We'd love to hear from you with any questions or comments you may have. Send an email to info@jodyharrisonbauer.com. That's info@jodyharrisonbauer.com. Now, back to Fearlessly Authentic.
Hey guys, welcome back to Fearlessly Authentic. I'm your host, Jody Harrison Bauer, and I'm here with Nikki Boyer. Thank you so much, Nikki, for being here with us and talking about your book that's coming out when? Next week, right?
So Molly's book is coming out August 18th. So Tuesday. Is that Tuesday? Oh my gosh, Jody, that's Tuesday.
I am so excited. Tell us about the book.
Okay. I think the most important thing to know about the book is that it is a deeper, darker dive into Molly's life. So she wrote it from her hospital bed. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine going through all these sexual escapades and then getting to the point where you're realizing that you're dying within weeks or a month. So she, during a time when she should have been resting and just sort of sitting and going through the process of passing, she decided to pull out her computer and do the hardest work of her life, which is to write a book, right? She'd been waiting her whole life to write it.
I've been trying to write a book for 10 years. And I have somebody in my life who has known me for 10 years, Joyce, if she's listening, and she's been telling me I need to write a book. I said, who's gonna read my book? What should I write about? Now I have a lot to write about. Yeah. But it is a very difficult thing. I keep texting her. I go, how do I start? Where do I start?
Right.
Well, you and I will talk about it later. But
no, I love that though. I think you should start. I think Molly wanted to write a book her entire life. And she said to me, why did I wait to die to write about my life? So Jody, you're going to write a book and I'm going to read it.
Just what you said, like people wait too long and then it's too late. And there was Molly on her deathbed, literally and figuratively. Yeah. She is writing her book. When I listened to it, I did not understand how she ever had the brain power, where did she get the energy to do something like this?
She would schedule it she was very clear about what she wanted to do. So she would say to her doctors, like, I cannot have pain meds from this time to this time because I can't think clearly. And so she told the whole floor, I mean, she was there for almost 4 months. So you have to imagine everyone knew who she was. Everyone loved her. Right. And everyone knew she was writing a book. She had written a couple of chapters months prior. But I think she really dug in and got really clear with herself. I think for the people that listen to the podcast, you start to understand why she chose sex. You start to understand her relationships with her family, with her ex, with her friends, with strangers in her life, how she showed up. And it's darker, it's a little deeper, but it's also like, how do I say this? It's also from the point of view of looking back at her life. Like when you listen to the podcast, you're kind of in her life with her. And then the book allows you this sort of reflective, like looking back and seeing, oh, this is what I learned. This is why I did it. And I think it's going to be interesting for people that are fans of the podcast to dig into the book because it's going to be a whole, even though you know her, you're getting to know her more deeply. And I think that's going to be, it's an intense read. It's beautiful. It's witty. It's dark. And it's really brave. And knowing that she wrote it, clicking away, on her little computer from her hospital bed. Oh, I love her.
Her mom was in there with her, and you were with her almost every day. I know that one of the things we talked about was finding the headspace to always be there when you have, a significant other in your life, children, work, and finding the headspace for somebody you care about so much. You're working on this project. So part of it is work, but it's work with different. It's different than, than
Yeah.
the regular work that you do. And
Yeah.
how, for people who might have that person in their life, where and how did you find that headspace to be there for Molly in the way that maybe, in the way that you wanted to be there, and the way she needed you to be there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. That is such a good question, because I don't even know if I was conscious of what I was doing in the moment, but I know I luckily have a great partner, my fiance. Fiance, it's such a funny word. We just got engaged like
I
2
do
months
not
ago.
like
I'm
that
like,
word,
fiance.
fiance.
Who came up with that?
I
Oui,
actually-
oui, bonjour.
I actually told my husband we were engaged for, I think 6 months. Yes, we were engaged for 6 months because
Yeah.
I don't like that word fiance.
I know.
And I don't like the word boyfriend either when I'm
I
like,
know.
almost, "Hey, my boyfriend."
I know. It's just, I know. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But my fiance and my 2 stepdaughters, who are 17 and 14,
Mhm.
and my mom and my brother, my whole family, I was very open with them about my process. And so I think anyone who is a friend or a caretaker of someone who's going through this, and you need to be there for them and be of service and also be their person, you need to also take care of yourself. So I would be very honest with people about how I was feeling, where I was feeling. I didn't do the martyr thing, like I'm taking care of my best friend and I'm doing everything. I was very honest with myself in the process. I
Must
let
have been
myself.
exhausting.
Yes, Jody, thank you for saying that. I was emotionally exhausted. Not only was I watching my best friend die, I was also trying to work and trying to be a stepmom and trying to be a dog owner and trying to be a
A lover.
fiance and exactly a lover, trying to keep my sex life alive and my life alive. And it was but I learned so much about myself going through it. And Molly never made me feel responsible for her. I mean, if it were up to her, I would have been in her room 24/7, but she never
Right.
made me feel like I had to. She had a lot of respect for my family and for my life. And even though she wanted to kind of be the center of my world, right? Because
Right.
I was her person, she allowed for me to still do those things and feel okay. But the funny thing is, she really loved to be the center of my world. And here she is years after her passing, and she is the center of my
Yes.
world right now. Like
Yes.
everything I'm doing, I feel like is for her. So I think she would be enjoying this.
I absolutely love that. And everybody around you was super supportive of what, did anybody
Yeah.
think you guys were crazy for journaling this entire journey? And did anyone say this
No.
is a little weird, or why do you want? And
That's
I
funny
know,
you say, yeah, no, now that you're bringing that up, my mom, I think, was a little confused because she came out to visit and I was working with Wondery at the time and Molly had even already passed. And my mom was like, why is this? I don't get this. Like, why is this so important? I know Molly's important, but I don't understand this podcast and the producing and the writing and the 4-hour phone calls. She couldn't wrap her head around it. And when she listened to the final episode, my mom called me and was like, couldn't even breathe. And she was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever listened to.
it really
And
is,
I was,
Nikki. It really, that's how I immediately, when I finished, I think I messaged you and said, I just finished listening and I am just so touched by the whole story.
thank you. It was really that last episode. Whenever I miss her, I'm going to get emotional. Whenever I miss her the most, I feel like if I listen to that episode, because even though she's dying, I mean, we recorded that, 2 weeks before she passed away. Even though she's dying, I feel so alive when I listen to that because I feel so connected to her. And for anyone who's afraid of death or, doesn't know what to say to someone who might be ill, like, I just feel like listening to this gives you just a window into a different world and a different perspective of how to look at death.
And what I also loved about it, that it was such a beautiful story, and that, yes, there were some dark parts about it. Her going to New York to be in Fashion Week, that must have been super cool. I hope she wrote about that. That was, but that was also a weird time. Like, it was cool. I was very taken aback
Really?
by how she felt during that time. So that was something interesting that I hope that she talks about in the book a little bit more. But I think so many women,
she does,
as you said before we took our break, was, don't wait until you get sick or it's too late. Like, do it now. Like, whether it's writing a book or getting fit or traveling or whatever it is, rescuing a dog like you and I have both done.
Right.
Whatever it is, do it. And a lot of people are afraid of what maybe the way they were brought up about sex and death. And isn't that interesting? And I don't know if it's a female thing, the sex part, or if it's the way you were brought up. And I know that, I grew up in Connecticut, and I was brought up back in the day, you didn't have sex with boys, not because you were going to get a disease or you were going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom literally put the fear of God in me to never have sex ever in my entire life. Like, Jody, never have sex.
Right.
We didn't talk about it. She didn't ever say to me, sex is a beautiful thing. Sex is a wonderful thing. And my oldest daughter, who I said is now 31, my ex-husband and I wouldn't let her see Titanic. And this was because there was the sex scene.
Oh, right.
And then, he painted the picture of her.
Right.
And Alyssa was in 3rd grade, and all of her friends were letting her, all the parents were letting their kids. And she would say, even so-and-so's mom is. And so I said, I'm sorry. Anyway, long story short, she comes out of the shower after we're arguing about this, and she says, now she's 8 years old, and she says, I know what sex is. And I said, you do, huh? And so we had this conversation about sex, and thank goodness she said, I never want to have sex in my life. Well, good, you're 8 years old. Good, I'm glad you don't want to have sex. But I think it's something that as women, we need to talk about a lot. We need to talk about our sexual experiences and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. So
absolutely,
we don't get to be like how I was after I got divorced in my 40s, only having sex with 2 people in my entire life when I was 42 years old, having sexual experiences.
Right.
And so, I've told my daughters, please have as many, healthy sexual experiences as you can before you decide who you want to spend the rest of your life with. And women don't do that. Why do you think that is?
I think because from the get-go, if a little boy has a bunch, not to make this super gender specific, but it is when we're young. If a little boy has a bunch of girlfriends, then he's like a badass, right?
Right.
But if a little girl has a bunch of boys that like her and she's like juggling a bunch of boys, then she's looked at in a different way. There's no high five mentality. So I think I don't know. I think we're brought up to think that. And then when you look at pornography, it's never based on the women's pleasure. It's always based on the men. And it's almost like we aren't allowed to have pleasure. We're designed to make a baby, right? We have sex for children. And so I think this dialogue that we have, goes against the whole idea of no, we can have pleasure. We can have partners. We can have multiple partners. We can do what we want because it's our body. And I think it's starting to shift and change. The pendulum is swinging. And I was so proud of Molly because she had no shame in her game. And what I also loved about her is that a lot of the times our sexual pleasures come from things that we have shame about. Like we have shame about what we like. So we have shame or we feel bad that we like this certain thing or that certain thing. We're afraid to tell people. With Molly, there was no shame. She sort of just met everybody where they were and was willing to explore and find things. And so my advice is to people is to really tap into what you like and what you want and don't have any shame in it. Because I promise you, there's somebody out there that likes what you like and will do what you want to do.
Advice, Nikki. Yeah, you know. I love when she talked about the foot fetish guy.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not a feet person.
I don't like feet either.
But as she spoke about it and kind of when I was going through her phone and I saw all these foot photos of her that she was sending to these men, I thought there is something kind of sexy and sensual about this. So I started to understand it a little more. But man, there are some guys that are into feet. They don't need anything but feet. And that's just fascinating.
It is fascinating. Wow. We should do a show about fetishes and because it is.
I'd love that.
I'd love to know where all of these ideas come from. And again, there should be no shame in liking what you like. Do you need to tell the world? Do you need to write a book about everything that you like sexually? No. But to be honest with yourself, as long as you're with a partner that you trust.
Yeah. And as long as you're safe, right? You're not harming anyone, like go for it.
Right. So were you ever afraid that given the therapy she was going through, that maybe she didn't have the stamina to do some of the things? I mean, or that she was going to hurt herself because she lost a lot of weight. She was frail. She wasn't eating. She wasn't keeping food down. Yet she was still having these sexual experiences, and they weren't all about having intercourse. It wasn't like she was whoring around.
Right.
I mean, she was, but
right. But I know
but
what
in
you
her
mean.
own
Yeah.
way, like she had her own
Right.
control. And I mean, this is what she wanted to do. This is what she wanted to do, and she had control over her body. But were you ever worried about her getting hurt or sick or something?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because yes, I was very concerned at times because I would see her in the in-between times when her treatment would kick her butt. Like she knew the timing, like when she'd start a treatment that she gets an adrenaline rush and she's okay. And then all of a sudden she gets knocked out. So I used to bring her food and see her on the bathroom floor and see her looking pale and sick and unable to lift her head. And I couldn't believe that same woman had been on a date 6 nights ago and was, doing what she was doing. So there was no sort of middle ground with her. She always had these high highs and these low lows. But I think that's what kind of kept her going. The dating really kept her feeling alive during a time when she was feeling horrible. So yeah, I was worried about her. There were times when she'd come home super late and I'd be like, God forbid something happened to you or you get stuck somewhere.
Right.
You aren't able to fend for yourself right now because you're so weak. So she started to learn when it felt good and when it didn't. We had a system. She would check in and text me and let me know she was okay.
worried about her.
Yeah,
I was worried. I was like, why are you doing this? I was so happy that she was doing it, but
right.
I'm like, okay, where's Nikki?
I know,
Nikki's
right?
There to help her out.
Totally. But when I would say to her, I'm afraid for you, she would say to me, what's going to happen? What's the worst thing that could happen to me? I don't have a lot of fear left in me, which is interesting from a little girl who used to walk around with a lot of fear and anger. Here she is, this woman who's kind of feeling fearless and invincible because what are you going to do? She said in the podcast, what are you going to do? Kill me?
Right. I remember that. I remember sharing that with a few of the women that I was telling them about the podcast, that
right.
comment she made. She goes, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to die. Someone's going to kill me. I'm dying. And so was she always like that? Or did you see her personality changing?
I saw her confidence changing.
Uh-huh.
I saw her, I did watch her change. I watched her give less F's is what she used to say. Everybody, she just she didn't give an F, and she was just really into living in the moment and not worrying about the what ifs. And there were times when I was worried about her, but I think she learned. In the book, she goes into this. There were some experiences that we didn't talk about in the podcast that we were going to get into season 2. There were some experiences that were traumatizing and hard on her, but she learned so much from those moments. And it's kind of a tease for the book, but I really think it's interesting to know the other side of the sexual escapades when she was sort of reverting back to old behavior or found herself in predicaments that didn't feel safe or good. And I think was really honest about it because she said, yes, sex was a big part of my awakening, but also dealing with the trauma through the sex was also a part of her awakening too, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because again, that sex and feeling alive or dying, it's so connected because, I mean, sex is a normal thing to be doing. We are animals, and we need that touch and that feel. And if anybody out there who has children, if you don't give them that nurturing and that touch and that feel, then they're not going to want to do that with others.
Right.
And making everything feel safe and okay and feeling that loved feeling. And we all want to feel loved, especially at such a scary time in her life.
And I think that's a beautiful segue, because at the end of the day, even though she was looking for sexual compatibility, deep down, I think she knew she was really looking for love. And I think she needed to give herself permission to go through the sex stuff, to get to the other side of it, to say, okay, now I'm really ready to incorporate emotions and sex together so that I can find that kind of love. And she realized that she was ready for that love. And she discovered that while she was on her deathbed, which
It
is
sounded
very
like
profound.
I know, she was finally opening up her heart. And I
Yeah.
remember her saying that to you, that, yeah, I think I want somebody to
Yeah,
love.
I know. And the beauty of it is that she did fall in love, right? Like she
Right.
really deeply fell in love with herself, which is
Yes.
just awesome.
Yes. That's what I love. That's what
I
I
know.
so love. So where is her mom? I know her mom was a big part of her life. I know she was
Mhm.
in the hospital room with her for all of those months. They had a
Oh my
difficult
gosh, yes.
relationship, and so like so many women do, have push-pull
Yeah.
relationships with their mom. And how does she feel about you carrying on Molly's wish to get this book out?
She is Molly's, both of her parents, her mother and her father, are
Okay.
ecstatic about the fact that I am continuing to get her out there and continue her legacy. They're grateful, even though the book is going to kind of, shine the light on things that may not be easy for people to read. It may put them in a certain light because of things that happened in the past. But what I find so beautiful is that they are so ready to shine the light on her, and whatever her story is, they want it to shine bright, no matter what it means for them personally, because they're so supportive of this. And I think it's been a real learning curve for all of us to figure out,
Mhm.
this is Molly's story to tell, right? And we all have to just allow her words. Like when I had her book and publishers were like, well, maybe we should do this to it, or maybe we should fix this, or maybe you should write some chapters to put in between. And I tried all of those things and nothing felt right. It just felt like it needed to be Molly's
Just Molly.
memoir, just Molly. And so
Right.
that's what the book is. And I can't wait
So
for
it's
people
going
to
to
read
be
it. And
released on Tuesday,
yeah, August 18th.
and
And
it's
I
called
do,
Dying for
it's called,
Sex. No?
no, it's actually, there's a different title. So
Okay.
I haven't even told anybody what the title is yet. So
Are
I'm
you
going
going
to
to
do
tell
a book.
me?
I'm going to do, I love you, Jody. I'm going to do a book cover reveal on Saturday
Okay.
to let everybody know the picture on the cover is just, it's just everything. And the title, I think, is really profound, and it's not Dying for Sex. She had a different
Okay.
title. And so I'm going to release that. And then the book goes for sale on August 18th, and you can find it on Amazon. But the best place to get all information about the podcast and Molly is dyingforsexpodcast.com. You can get on a VIP list. I'm going to be sharing things about Molly through the next 6 or 7 months of just little goodies, pictures that she drew, things about her life that are just interesting. So, and the thing is, it's not just about Molly, right? It's not just Molly's
Right.
life. It's
Right.
how Molly looked at her life
Right.
and how she handled her death. And I think it's,
And I think she's going to help so many people. I
yeah,
really do.
thank
And
you.
thank you so much for bringing this to
Oh my
life.
gosh.
It's uh, just such a huge story. So I know that Molly became very confident after going through a lot of these adventures, and you saw her confidence grow, and she came from maybe being a fearful person to more courageous and
Mm-hmm.
really owning who she was.
Right.
And so one of the questions I always ask everybody at the end of the show is what fearlessly authentic means to you. Because you are
Ooh.
also, you being the co-pilot, we're right along with her.
I love that question. I think being fearlessly authentic is being able to admit when you mess up or when things aren't perfect. Because in this process, I wanted it to be so perfect for Molly. And I'm speaking for her a lot of the times. And sometimes I go, should I have said that or should I have done that? And sometimes I just have to be okay with not being perfect. So making mistakes is all part of being a human, and how you recover from those mistakes, I think, is even more important. So that's what I think authentic is being okay with the messiness of you, right?
Yes, I think so many people, that is a great answer, because I think so many times people feel that authentic has to be perfect. And I think
Right.
authentic is the ultimate of, after all of that messy stuff, getting to that point
Yeah.
where you can say, this is, hello world, this is me,
Yeah.
all of me. And it's been a messy ride, right? Because
Right.
we
Exactly.
all have had that mess, and it's been a
Yes.
messy ride, but this is as authentic as I am in this moment.
Totally. You totally get it. That's it.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the show. I cannot believe that the time is gone already.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
This
I
was
have
so
to have
great.
you
You
back.
are so good at what you're so good at just being a human and telling stories. And that's a rare thing in this world. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I'm so glad that we met.
Me too.
I'm so happy. Is there anything else? We have 30 seconds left. Is there anything else? The daily show that you do, the Daily Smile.
Yeah, the Daily Smiles on Wondery. Subscribe it. Yeah, and also follow me at Nikki Boyer, NIKKIBOYER. I'd appreciate it. I'm always going to tell you what's going on with Molly and her story. And there is more to come. I just want to say there's a tease. There's more to come in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you guys, whoever didn't listen to this live, you can find the show tomorrow on any place you listen to podcasts, Fearlessly Authentic. And please subscribe, share the love. And Nikki, thank you. Mwah. Love you so much.
Mwah. Love you too. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.